Welcome to episode 3 of the 360 podcast from Park Tudor School, an all-around look at student-centered education. I'm Laura Gellin.
And I'm Adrian Pumphrey. And today we'll be talking with Scott Looney, who is head of school at Hawkins School in Cleveland, Ohio, and founder of the Mastery Transcript Consortium.
We'll be chatting with Scott today about how the consortium aims to revolutionize the high school transcript.
Hope you enjoy the episode.
Well, Scott Looney, thank you so much for joining us today on the 360 podcast. We're really happy to have you with us.
Great. It's great to be here.
So we'd love to hear about the Mastery Transcripts and everything that's happening with that. But first, I wondered if you could tell us a bit of the background as to how that came to be and how it's where we're at now.
Sure. I'll give you the medium-sized version of it. It really came to be to some degree because I've been in education for 32 years, and there's some trend lines I don't like that have increasingly been bothering me and a lot of the people I work with. And then I also had children, so I had a sense of the inherent differences of people who have given all the same educational experiences and how the one-size-fits-all approach to education, which is so prominent in what we do, even at the finest schools, is just a failed construct. And so I, and along with other people, have come to believe that the industrial production model, the idea that we put kids in a factory and that every 8-year-old should be in second grade and they should move along at the pace of the teacher, and that in high school kids need tests at midterms and finals, which we all accept as a given, right? And that is actually an anomaly in the arc of human history. That most of what we know about school, if I ask people, what do you think of when you think of school? Almost everything that will come out of their mouth is about 130 years or less old. Prior to that, almost all humans learn the same way, which is the way where evolutionary biology would suggest that we're actually programmed to learn, which is through trying things, by doing things, by collaborating and partnering and failing and getting advice from knowledgeable people proximate to us until we were good at something. But we decided in the late 18th, early 19th century to start systematizing that. And when the Industrial Revolution took off, we really systematized that because the central ethic of the Industrial Revolution was efficiency. And it happened at the same time that there were hundreds of thousands of immigrants pouring into the United States. And it happened at the same time that compulsory education to 12th grade started to become an international phenomenon. The idea that we needed an educated populace to be a healthy democracy, which is a very good idea, coincided with a lot more people showing up. And so we needed efficiency. I know there's these systems we use to produce widgets and in the manufacturing world. Why couldn't we apply this to the education of children, which is why we have bells and discrete blocks of time and that are standardized across all children, and we put them on the assembly line based on date of manufacture, which is birth date, and we move them off the assembly line. Now some of them don't want to move down the assembly line very comfortably, so we teach them that they're broken. And we treat them like a quality control problem. And that's what an industrial model applied to an organic reality produces. And I just got really sick of watching a lot of talent, human talent being wasted, a lot of psychic wounds for kids who really should feel great about who they are and their capacities. And I got really nervous more recently, later in my career, because as selective college admissions is in a system that rewards them, and this isn't a human problem. There's no villains in this story. This is a systems problem. Selective colleges get rewarded for increasing and inflating their inquiry and applicant pools, having more and more applicants every year. It's the reason that the most selective colleges all over the country are still running around recruiting. Really? Princeton, Harvard, Yale, and Stanford need more applicants? Yeah, they do, because they want to be able to say that they only admit 4%, and the following year they'd like to make it 3%, so that they can be the most selective colleges in the United States, because a lot of their brand and reputation and all of the good things that come with it follow. What it does on our end, but I'll articulate for your audience, is it kids are increasingly feeling like they have to be absolutely perfect to have any
Right.
chance at their dream school. You combine that with the fact that the 5-point grading scale, which was invented by Mount Holyoke University in 1894, which was designed to be a perfect bell curve, meaning 16.7% of the grades were supposed to be A's and 16.7% of the grades were supposed to be F's, has been completely compressed to a 2-point scale. There were only 2 grades in high school, A and not A. And because of that, we're telling kids, and I don't mean we as educators, we're telling them the opposite. But society is telling them that to have a chance at these kinds of schools, you have to do everything, and you have to do as much of it as possible, and you have to be perfect. So it's leading to a sense of hyper-perfectionism in our most talented kids. It's not healthy for them. There are record levels of mental health disorders in the most selective colleges. 40% of the freshman class at Harvard has a diagnosis of either depression or anxiety or both. These are the kids who won. These are the kids who won the system. You know, I have kids at my school who probably cut off a pinky to get into Harvard, right? So if the winners of the system are somehow getting the bells and whistles, the monetary rewards, but they're coming out emotionally crippled, it's a systems problem. Because you would think our best, brightest, most motivated kids should benefit from the journey. And so my school is a school that has both a historical intent towards a certain kind of education. We were founded by a disciple of John Dewey around character and around intellect and around applied learning. And so our faculty's been moving in this direction. And we started literally to create a laboratory high school, a second high school, a school within a school. So a second track, you can think of it in different ways, but where the kids come to the same school, but when class starts, one group of kids does something different. And these would be all project and problem-based courses organized around real-world problems. And they're elective. We intend to design it so that it'll be modular, so a kid who has an appetite for 4 years of it can do 8 semesters of it, and a kid who has a little appetite can pull out and do 1 semester of it. We started building this. The faculty at my school and I and other were building this. We were getting excited about it, and we ran into the assessment problem. And we realized that grades and Carnegie units, putting this on a standard time scale and having everyone move forward at the same time was one of the things we didn't want to put in our new model. We also realized that letter grading was not a great practice. This is a fact. This isn't an opinion. There is no research ever published that justifies letter grading as a way to enhance learning. And there are more than 40 journal articles that will talk about the pernicious effect of using a letter graded scale for learning and growth. So given that grades aren't a great idea and Carnegie units are graded, so we thought, well, how would we assess this? So we started coming up with models, and we ultimately realized that the biggest hurdle was the way we represented that to colleges. We had to summarize a student on 1 page, which we call a transcript, to a college, and we didn't want to put grades and Carnegie units. And actually, we didn't want to put content course labels either. A lot of what we're building are long block interdisciplinary courses where you take 1 class for a whole quarter. And it's the only thing you do for a whole quarter. Well, it's kind of hard to put that on transcript. Here's your 1 class.
Right.
So we started playing with transcript models, and we came up with some we really liked. And fortunately, my background, I did a lot of enrollment management. I have a lot of friends who happen to have gone on to becoming college admission deans. So I showed them my transcript. I said, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this transcript? And I showed it to about 5 of them in largely pretty selective colleges. And they all said roughly the same thing. Well, this is interesting. I can see why you're doing this. This would produce interesting kids. Yeah, we're going to hate it. So, okay, can you tell me why you're not going to like it? I said, look, we get what you're doing, but, Scott, we have to read thousands of applications. And if your school has a unique transcript, one that no one else has, good for you, but we'll just ignore it and look at the other things in your file. And I said, well, I don't want you to ignor the whole academic record of a kid. And so we gave up for a little while, and we said, well, that's obviously not going to work. Until I ran into one of the deans. This is a dean at an Ivy League college who's a friend of mine. And I said to her, well, what if I brought like 25 to 50 other prep schools with me? What if it wasn't just Hawken? And she instantaneously said, well, that would be completely different. If they were schools of your caliber, we'd assume it's legitimate, and if we knew we were going to get a lot of them, we'd work with you to learn how to read them. And I said, well, I'll be back. And so I spent 6 months calling my friends who run prep schools around the country to beg them to come to Cleveland for 2 days to talk about it. And after a 2-day retreat, 28 of the 30 schools joined the Mastery Transcript Consortium. We formed it. And so now we have 220 schools in 21 different countries who want to work together as a team to create a new way to present kids to colleges. And we've got a lot of work to do, but we think it's a model that will allow us to measure the whole child. Traditional academic stuff, content knowledge, but we can also credit what's called social-emotional learning. We can give a transcript credit for persistence, resilience, leadership, teamwork, empathy, in addition to algebraic reasoning, creative writing, historical research. And one of the unique features of our transcript is that each individual school writes their own credits. There is no credits from the Mastery Transcript. The schools create their own standards. We're just a platform. We're just a vehicle for you to decide what your standards are and to have a faculty conversation around which ones are graduation requirements. We call those foundational credits. And which ones are beyond graduation. We call those advanced credits. And so they're foundational mastery credits and advanced mastery credits. And they can be weighted. So what displays on the transcript is the total list in different areas. We call them competency areas, performance areas. And the schools create those too. You can decide or you could organize if you wanted to about traditional areas, English, math, history, or you could organize your credits around the 4 C's, communications, collaboration, critical thinking, creative thinking, but that's up to you as a school. Because it's a software platform that manages all this, you can't have 30 performance areas, but you can have an almost unlimited set of mastery credits. The other revolution in our approach, which we're very excited about, is this is not a piece of paper. Your transcript still has to be on one page, but now it's really one screen because all colleges read files electronically. But why can't that be the home page that takes you other places? So if you click on a mastery credit, it takes you to the standards page, which shows you what it was based on. And right on that page are links to all of the artifacts and all of the teacher feedback that were submitted. So the way a student earns a credit in our system is not at the end of a course. It's by aggregating their best work and the teacher feedback around it and submitting it to 2 people at my school that I've appointed to have authority to issue credit. So I would pick my 2 best writing teachers to be the ones who assess creative writing. And so a student would put their creative writing portfolio together. This is all electronic. They'd submit it electronically. If both teachers give it a thumbs up, the credit goes right on your transcript. So in some cases, kids might earn their creative writing credit halfway through their freshman year. Some kids might not. But there's no timestamp. So colleges don't know that it took me 4 years to earn my creative writing credit and it took you 6 months. We still got the same credit. So it allows some variability in time. And if I submit for my creative writing credit and it's not good enough, I don't get a B- on my transcript. I just get a note back saying, your poetry wasn't up to standard. You need to submit better poetry. So I work with my teachers. I do better poetry. I put it back in. I resubmit. Eventually, hopefully, it's good enough to meet the standard, and it becomes so everything on your transcript's an A. But so you keep trying. And so the idea is that we let kids work on different time scales. They work to mastery. If I have a B-, I didn't master anything. And right now, the problem with the assembly line is, because the clock ran out, it's time to go to the next class. I'll never see it again. If I got a B- in geometry, I'm not seeing geometry again. I never mastered geometry. So we're calling these kids educated, and we're putting them out in the world when they didn't actually educate the stuff we think is important. So you don't get to graduate from my high school anymore unless you can master geometry. Geometry is a foundational credit. If you can't master geometry, you don't get a graduation requirement. Now, some kids might have to work till their junior year to master geometry. Some kids might have mastered it before they got to high school. They might say, here's my evidence. Here's the other last thing, and then I'll shut up.
No need.
Which is each school gets to decide what evidence they'll look at, which means that you can look at evidence that comes out of co-curriculars. If you want to give a kid a credit for leadership, you can look at what they do on their sports teams or in the musical. If you wanted to give credit for their summer job and it came from a credible adult, you could do that. A school could decide, no, we're only going to credit the things that happen in classrooms. That's up to the school. But if you're going to credit the whole child, you need to look at every place they produce great work and everywhere they do something extraordinary and give them the ability to get credit for that, which we think will then, when they present, give the college a more whole child perspective on the kid, which will allow us to move past treating them like they're widgets and go back to treating them like they're uniquely shaped human beings who should be as uniquely shaped on the back end as they were on the front end, only better, improved and enhanced by the school along the way. So, sorry, that's a long introduction to that. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's exciting.
There are so many great things that you were just talking about, and I think one of them is a lot of times with high schools and wanting to be the change that a lot of times we do run up against what colleges want, what colleges expect, the college admissions process, very competitive. And it starts to feel like a chicken or the egg, right? Who's going to budge first? And I just love that you went to them and said, what if I get a whole gang? If I get my gang together and we're all on board with this? And I think that required a lot of courage and risk taking and thought and research and collaboration and cooperation. And it's demonstrating why all those skills are so important,
right.
And what the Mastery Transcript can offer, some real world authentic experiences of practicing those traits that we need in students and in leadership and all of those things. So another thing that I was thinking about, and I love that idea of like, what does true mastery look like? Right. And you mentioned that it's the way it is at Hawken right now is that it's a school within a school.
That's what we were building, yeah.
Right?
And we're still in the process of building it.
What can you give us an example of maybe what a project would look like,
Sure.
or one that's worked out well, or one maybe even that we tried and it didn't work out?
You mean a project like the kids would work on, or the project that the school is working on?
Project that the kids would work on.
Sure.
I'm curious to know, like, what would it look like for a student?
Sure.
Or a day in a student, or a week for a student?
Sure. We've already started building pieces and parts of right now we have a placeholder, we're calling it the lab school, we'll probably name it something else. We've been building them for years, and so one of the things we have started as a component part of this is what we're calling macro courses. So a macro course at Hawken is 4 blocks out of your 6-block schedule, so it's 60% of a kid's schedule. It's an interdisciplinary, we've smushed it, which in the way our schedule works is full day, half day, full day, half day, in a 6-day cycle. So they have 2 full days where that's the only thing they do all day, and 4 half days. And then the other half days they take singletons, math, whatever. So we built, the first macro we built was a course called Entrepreneurship. And it's not built like a lot of entrepreneurship programs. A lot of them you bring in business experts and they pontificate about how great they are. And the kids do some case study that's interesting, but it's constructed. We don't do that. We find very small startup businesses that are so desperate for help that they'll let high school kids work on their problems, and we apprentice them out to those businesses. And the kids are given a very concrete problem that they have 3 weeks to solve, and they present back to the business owner or the investors. Meanwhile, the teacher helps them along the way, and the teacher assesses them on the back end for their growth over time. They do 3 businesses, starting with a super simple business, and then eventually a very complex business. And then at the end, they do a design competition to come up with 4 new business ideas. And they're broken up into competitive teams. And then we bring in investors, they're not allowed to give the kids money, although I've had them try to negotiate and say, that's a really good idea, can I buy that? And the kid, I said, when they graduate, you and their parents can sit down and negotiate intellectual property rights, but we make all the kids sign away their rights until they graduate. It's Creative Commons, because otherwise we'd have all sorts of problems. But, so they're doing real problem solving. It's not constructive problem solving. It's not teacher constructive problem solving. And the thing that is clear to me, and the reason we want to build a whole high school organized around having kids go out and solve problems in the world, because there are problems in biochemistry, there are problems in applied historical research, there are problems in how to articulate yourself in writing, both in fiction and the world is not short of problems that are within the range of high school kids to try to tackle. The problem is how nonlinear you have to be in approaching them for every individual. It forces an individualization that our whole system is not very designed to do very well because it has a fixed time scale.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been moved. So to answer your question, we now have more macros. We have applied engineering. We're creating a new one called architecture and design. And these will be the semester programs. So we will have a semester program in entrepreneurship. We'll have a semester program in urban studies. We'll have a semester program in real world problems in biochemistry. We'll have and we will cycle those programs through the discipline lenses so that hopefully when you come out, you will have biology and chemistry and physics, but it will all be applied and it'll all be and you'll be able, if you have done well and you've learned, to demonstrate that you've learned things about physics and demonstrate you've learned things about chemistry and demonstrate you learned things. There's two departments that are proving very difficult to integrate into interdisciplinary, and so we may do them differently. One is math and the other is foreign language, and for completely different reasons. Math, because kids are on such a wide spectrum. Any cohort and math is so linear. It's completely sequential, and so it ends up being tough to. So, so we have a plan for that. We call it the math lab. So the kids will and they'll still be very project based, but it'll be. Anyway, it's complicated. The reason foreign language is complicated is because it's not one department. We have multiple languages. Right. So if we go to an interdisciplinary approach, you have to really commit to one language. You have to say, okay, it's going to be done in higher bilingual faculty. So it can be done. We personally didn't want to force kids to not be able to take Chinese or not be able to take. So that's a design choice. You could integrate it, but so we've been building these component parts, and they work. I mean, and not only do they work, but the kids don't care about their grades. They care about not looking embarrassing in front of the business owner because they know that this guy just mortgaged his house and bid everything on this, and they better not give him bad advice. So it's very cool. One of my sons went through this program, and one of the business they worked on is a fast casual Indian restaurant called Chula, which was trying to be kind of the Chipotle of Indian, and so they came up with a marketing campaign. They came up with menu items, and a couple of the menu items that my son's group are on the Chula, and now they're scaling. They have I think 25 restaurants all over the country, and
that's great.
He's like, oh, that dessert idea was mine. Like,
that's exciting.
I said, so it's authentic, it's real, and they feel like they've done something that's as important to them as getting a good grade.
Yeah.
And when and we don't have to grade kids to be great, to practice hard and be good on the athletic field. We don't have to grade. Imagine what would happen if we give grades at the end of every musical rehearsal. You'd have no one in your play, right? And they'd hate it.
Yeah.
Kids want to be good at things. They want to feel a sense of mastery. They want to think, I'm really good at something. And they're willing to work hard to get there, especially if they're in the care of an adult that they know has their back and trusts them. The problem with grades is that the constant judgment gets in the way of the feedback. When I talk to the Mastery Transcript, when I talk to audiences of educators about the Mastery Transcript, I ask a question. I said, raise your hand if you enjoy being judged by someone in hierarchical authority over you 3 to 6 times a week. No hands went up. Now, raise your hands if you enjoy getting supportive, direct, specific, and kind feedback, timely feedback from someone you really trust who's trying to help you be really good at something. Every hand went up. I said, yeah, that's the difference between grades and feedback.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've said to vice presidents of enrollment, I said, guys, we have a problem. You keep thinking my job is to sort and stratify kids. I keep thinking it's my job to grow each of them as far as I can take them. And your sorting and stratifying is getting in the way of my growth. So we've got to renegotiate our understanding. We need to renegotiate our deal. And what's been pleasantly surprising is they want us to. We have 80 colleges, including some of the most selective colleges, who've already gone on record saying they'll consider the Mastery Transcript equivalent to their existing transcript.
Wow.
That was Scott Looney, head of school at Hawkins School and founder of the Mastery Transcript Consortium.
Join us next time as we continue discussing with Scott what the implications are for member schools.